Well, welcome to the FRA launch series. How do you get started and where do we go from here? I'm here with two leaders in the marketing tech industry, Wellford Dillard, the CEO of the CM Group, and Ethan Zoubek, who's the Chief Revenue Officer of the CM Group. I really appreciate both of you joining me today to share this with your experience with our community.
Sure thing, happy to do it.
So I'm going to jump right in. Before I do that, just a quick background. Wellford holds an MBA from Maryland and a BA in finance from the University of Memphis. And Ethan has spent 20 years in entrepreneurship in tech companies and holds a BA in English literature from Rutgers University. And so to get started, really my question is, how did you get started? What were your first few moves in your career?
Ethan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I grew up in New Jersey, and Sean, as you mentioned, I studied English literature at Rutgers. Both of my parents are math and science people. My father was a nuclear engineer. He actually spent the 70s trying to simulate blowing up a breeder reactor for Westinghouse. My mother is a master's in nursing and taught nursing at Pitt, and then went back to Rutgers. She actually got her MSW, master's in social work, from Rutgers, and has been a psychotherapist for decades since. So I was a rebellious child. So math and science, mother and father, it just stands to reason that I'm going to go and study literature at Rutgers. It's one of the better programs in the country, and it was kind of nice being a state school because it wasn't that expensive. But I'm really glad that I did that. In retrospect, taking advantage of the opportunity to study something that I loved. I loved reading. I loved the narrative and the other worlds that you can enter. And I'm pleased that I took the time to go deeply into that and to follow that path and that process. And when you graduate with a degree in English literature, you really have like three choices of what you're going to do next. One is wait tables. The second is sell advertising for a New York magazine. And the third is go to grad school. So I got a job waiting tables while I decided, do I go to grad school or do I sell advertising in New York? And then for a reason completely unrelated to that, I ended up moving to Austin, Texas. So I moved to Austin. I ended up meeting my wife there when she was going to graduate school. But when I was in Austin, I was waiting tables at a famous Mexican restaurant down by Zilker Park in Austin. And one of the things that I've learned over time is, like, you never know who you're going to meet. So comport yourself accordingly, right? Just conduct yourself as if you're going to meet somebody interesting and important. And that's what exactly what happened. One of my tables, it was a busy Thursday night. I was waiting tables and I was trying to be as present and as thoughtful as I could. It ended up that one of the women at the table was the head recruiter for Dell. So she liked the way I conducted myself, said, "You've got to come interview at Dell." She invited me to come up the next morning. And Dell at the time was 2 buildings in Round Rock, Texas, right at the beginning of the PC boom. So I interviewed, I got a job, and that's how I got into technologies. I was amusing and nice to someone at a Mexican restaurant.
That's a pretty incredible story. Wellford, what about yourself?
So I grew up in Memphis. We had a family-owned business. We manufactured doors, big steel fabrication work. I started working there somewhere after 7th grade. My father didn't mind violating child labor laws, and I always thought that I would go into that. And so it's the reason I went to Memphis State at the time, and I bounced through, I think, 5 different majors while I was there. I happened to be in finance at one of those moments where things just click and you just hit that one thing where for whatever reason, the tumblers and the lock all fell into place, and that clicked. And it happened to be, I think I was 5.5 years in. And it was also the exact moment where my mom said, "Finish or we're not paying anymore." So that was good that I found my thing. And then I got out and I worked for my dad, and then just decided one day, literally, I didn't want this thing handed to me, that I wanted to go make my own, just sort of find my own path. And I took the GMAT, did well, got a letter from Maryland that said, hey, saw your test score. We'd love you to come. And I said, when? And they said, August. And I said, it's July. Can I defer for a year? They said, yes. That's how it worked. And my dad said, like, look, I really respect this. I understand it. Just, I'm going to sell the business to somebody else. I plan to die broke, leaving all my money to, he'd started a couple of charities. So, I wish you the best. There's no safety net. When I got to Maryland, I got interested in investments, and I really wanted to go into investment banking. And there was an investment bank that was started up, that was in DC, that had started. And I had told, I got my wife, we got married right after grad school, and I told my wife, I'm like, I'm going to work there. And we were on our honeymoon when she said, and I turned down a couple of jobs in New York, and she said, so just out of curiosity, like, when are you planning on taking a job? Because I'm a little worried it's going to be the point at which you can no longer play golf at the student rate at Maryland. And I said, look, one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to get, either this investment bank's going to send me a restraining order, or I'm going to get an interview. Thankfully, it was the latter. And I got in, and, just worked your rear off there. I was the first one on the trading floor every single day, the last one to leave. I think, like Ethan, the story from there is just a series of breaks. I was, in terms of how I got my first CFO job, I was 31, and on 9/11, I had my first deal that I had, sourced and was running, and I was having this, those moments where life humbles you. And I was having this great moment of like, this is my deal. We're going to, we're closing this thing, and we're valeting the car at this super fancy golf course. And 9/11 happened, and I had friends that are calling, and all this happened, and term sheets got pulled for the deal. We had just had our first child, and we're living in DC while all this is happening. And I had that moment of like, this deal's not going to get done. I am not going to have a salary. And this company, they said, well, our deal's not getting done, and we're going to need a CFO. And I said, well, I have no idea I've never done that before. But I'll do that now. So that's how it started. I was CFO, COO of like 6 different software companies before getting the call, and we moved to Nashville to be a part of Emma, which was the starting point for this journey that Ethan and I are on now.
That's incredible. That's a really pretty neat story. So I know you've kind of alluded to that, your first big break. What about yourself, Ethan? What do you see as kind of your first big break?
So I started at Dell. I learned a lot. I didn't love the culture, so I left that business, and after leaving Dell, I got a job teaching kids how to take the SATs for the Princeton Review and working at a backpacking outfitter. I really enjoyed the work, but those two roles don't really go too far. I got a call from a friend of mine who was, he was also at Dell. He had left. He was at University of Texas, and this company had found him through the alumni network. He said, I got a call about a job. I'm doing something different, but I think you'd be perfect for it. You should talk to these guys. And the company was CitySearch. And CitySearch was one of the early internet companies. It was backed by Bill Gross's Idea Lab. Steven Spielberg had money in it. And it was one of the first local directories for the internet. This is back in the mid 90s. And Austin was the third market that they had opened up. It was San Francisco, it was Raleigh, and then Austin, Texas. I was the first sales guy hired in that market. And it was an incredible opportunity to go out into the community and work with different brands, large and small, to learn more about selling, to get trained by really, really, really good people and learn about how you enable a sales team, and to be really at the beginning of something. And that was just a tremendous opportunity. I learned a ton. When my wife finished grad school, she was offered a position at a hospital up in State College, Pennsylvania, which was too good to be true. So we moved up to Pennsylvania. I didn't have a job, much like with Wellford, my family business, which was construction equipment. I had told my father, thank you, but that's not the business I'm interested in getting into. But I ended up being connected to that in a tangential way. I moved up to State College. I had no job. So I started a business. I figured, all right, I'll take what I've learned about the internet and this market and a community that I know and I have access to through my family, which is construction equipment. And we ended up building the first directory for construction equipment and supplies on the internet. And then just went from there. We did all sorts of interesting web projects and product catalogs and configuration tools. And it was that experience of marrying sort of the old line, family network, and network, something I've learned is just super important to, as I'd said earlier, comport yourself as if you never know who you're going to meet, because community and network just makes all the difference as you grow and evolve. With what I learned about technology and selling, and we created a business that we ran for 9 years and ended up selling to another software company down in Atlanta.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. What about, so I read somewhere that, so did you two meet for the first time as you both arrived with Emma, or did you know each other before that?
No, it was Emma. I had been so the CEO, the founder at Emma, a guy named Clint Smith. He was looking to do succession planning. He'd been there for 12 years. He was thinking about, what's the next step for him. And that's how the headhunter had found me when I was up in DC. And so I, agreed to move down. And Ethan was the same story. There was a guy who was on our board who'd been the co-founder at ExactTarget, which was a really large email company that had gone public, very successfully, bought by Salesforce. And he called, he'd been involved in recruiting me, and Ethan had been at ExactTarget. And this guy, Peter McCormick, called us when we were looking for, a chief revenue officer. And he said, there's only one person you should be talking to. And it's this guy, Ethan Zoubek. And there's no one on this planet that knows more about running selling organizations in this industry than Ethan Zoubek, which was a pretty good, that's a pretty good reference call to get. So that was, I think I was maybe 3 weeks in or something like that at Emma before, when Ethan and I had our first conversation.
And small world, Nashville was the fourth market for City Search. So Clint Smith, who had founded Emma, was one of the co-founders of Emma. Back when I was with City Search in Austin, Clint was the first editor for City Search Nashville.
Yeah. So it's been this, journey since then. We've now, the business, we sold it to a very large private equity fund. We've now acquired 6 other companies. So we've got 7 companies. Emma is only about 15% of our revenue at this point. And Ethan's, every time we do an acquisition, Ethan's guy who steps in and takes on that whole, the whole growth organization of each one of these businesses. So it's been a heck of a journey.
So you kind of partially answered this, kind of how you ended up in your current roles. I know because you came to Nashville, but it's evolved a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Just a little.
It's not what we thought it was. It's what in the world of like careful what you wish for things. I think it's both. It's very much what I think we both had wanted to do at some point, but probably saw this job as the stepping stone for that. And my view throughout my whole career was always, I took every job for the next job. And the way I actually ran it was I would sit down throughout my career and I would write my resume every 6 months, not because I was going to leave, but I would write it for where it's going to be in 6 months. And I would ask myself, what are the 2 things that I'm going to do in the next 6 months that are going to be so important it could replace some of the important things I have here today? And so, Emma was a huge transition for me and a real opportunity to step into a CEO role. I'd never imagined it would turn into what it turned into. It was what I hoped to be as the stepping stone to this opportunity.
And this is not easy. It is not easy to go from one business to 7 and to bring those teams together and to arrange the go-to-market and make all those adjustments and the messaging and the coordinating among departments. It is really, really challenging. And one of the things that I've thought about as we've been through this experience and this journey, is this notion that, because it was, at the time we lived in Boulder, Colorado. I was flying from Boulder to Nashville every week with Emma. And as when we were acquired and we brought these businesses together, it necessitated moving here. And I sat down, I thought about it and talked about it with my family. And one of the things that really compelled me to continue moving forward with this path is that it's hard. And the idea, I knew that I was stepping into something that was going to be challenging, that would pull me and stretch me in ways that had never happened before. And it was not going to be easy. And that was both frightening and really attractive, because that's the only way we grow, is by stepping into new things. I've seen my daughter do that, Chloe at FRA, in really remarkable ways. And one of the things that's been really important about that is the opportunity to do it with people that you really like and you really care about. And just, Wellford and I, doing this together from the beginning has been a really special and important part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been amazing.
So what's the best piece of advice you guys have received along the way that kind of impacts you, your life, your work, going as you're where you are now?
Why don't you take that one? Mine probably came from Nathan. So
what's that?
Mine probably came from you. So
that's kind of you to say. I've been thinking about this. I put a couple of them down. The first one is stop thinking. When you decide, go. And the easiest example of that is like when you're standing, like cliff jumping. You're at a lake, you're up on the cliff. When you decide you're going to go, stop thinking, go. And that notion has compelled me in lots of ways through life. Like when you know you're doing it, stop thinking and go. Which carries into the second notion, which is don't believe everything you think, right? Everything after that decision, which is maybe it's too far, maybe the water's not deep enough, maybe it's going to hurt a little bit when I land. All that is just noise that gets in the way. So the things that we tell ourselves often aren't true, and they skew our perspective. So this notion of decisive action, informed and thoughtful, but decisive, it helps you move through life at a pace and bring you into experiences that you normally would not have. Go.
Well, I don't go cliff jumping with Ethan. But I guess for me, a couple of things along the way. One was honestly in 7th grade, and it's stuck with me forever. I was working for my dad, and I walked in one day and I asked him, a question about something that he had asked me to do, and he said to me, and he said, "Well, what do you think we ought to do?" And I was like, I don't know. That's why I came to ask you. And he said, "Wellford, everybody back in that shop, they don't really need me here. It's just that all day everybody comes in here and they ask me questions about what they should do, and they just want me to tell them what to do. And what I'm asking of you is every time you come in here, have at least one answer to that question. And it doesn't have to be the right one, but just have one so that we can talk about it." That one thing of always coming with a solution, whether it's right or not, and being brave enough to say it. And my dad giving me the safe space to say it was incredibly, incredibly important. And then I have two more, and so apologies for rambling a bit, but the other one was, thankfully this was not said to me. I heard it said to someone who was sitting next to me when they asked a question of the guy who was running the investment banking group where I'd been. And he was asking him like when he was promotions were coming up. And he was asking him when he was like, was he going to get promoted to, a senior analyst? And this guy looked at him and said, "If you have to ask the question, you probably know the answer." He said, "Just put your head down, work your rear off, and you're never going to have to raise your hand. Somebody's always going to come carry you to that level and ask you. Your shoulder will always get tapped. Just be creative, be empathic, work your rear off, and you'll never have to ask for attention." And then my third one is something Ethan said to me, and he said to the whole company several times, and I've always loved it. It's the only thing that matters The only question that we have to ask ourselves is, what's the right thing to do? Is it hard? Tough. You just do it anyway. And like, that's been the thing I think that's gotten us through a lot of this journey together over the last couple of years, as we've stepped into a lot of situations where we had no idea what we were doing, but so often, the what is obvious. It's the how that defines us. And that simple message of the how just being shaped by what's the right thing to do, that's the right thing to do.
I think that's a pretty great advice for all of us, and especially for our students as they're getting ready to launch out kind of on their own experiences, particularly for our seniors. So what is something that if you look back on, you may have worried about that now you wonder, why'd I worry about that so much?
Probably some test in high school somewhere along the way. Maybe a date, I don't know. I think I pretty early on got to this notion of, my mom had a saying that was, today is the tomorrow you were worried about yesterday. And the idea that like everything comes and goes. And now, we walk into a board meeting we have one on Monday with some of the smartest people I've ever known in my entire life, who see, are in, hundreds, thousands of companies and know more about this than, would ever hope to learn. But it's just 3 hours. It's just 3 hours of a Monday, and it'll come and go, and we'll be on the other side of that on Tuesday, and it's okay. We get through everything. And I think, so I think I've just approached everything like that for a long time. Like, yeah, it's scary, but it's that, this too shall pass thing. So I don't know, Ethan.
Yeah, that notion of this too shall pass is a great one. It's true. I found over time that the highs aren't quite as high, the lows aren't as low, as my perspective shifted, and I know that everything pretty much ends up in balance. And just if it's an anxious time, if it's a scary time, give a little bit of prayer, a little bit of space, and things always, everything is always worked out in my experience. Everything is always worked out just fine. Everything is just fine. And I've worried a lot. I've had challenges over my life at different times with some pretty acute anxiety. And one of the things that I've learned related to that is that worrying about something isn't the same as working on it. Like, worrying is not productive. Worrying is not constructive. Right? It's just spinning cycles. And the best way to snap out of that, because it's almost never true. The best way to step out of that is to shift perspective and try to do something that's of service to someone else. That is a surefire way for me to be able to step out of that worrying. I know it's an answer to a different question, but I worried so much over so many things over the years, none of which have, if it doesn't kill you, it does make you stronger. There are a few things that reach that far, and the prayer, the quiet space, the giving things a little bit of room to work out. It's a great approach that's been shared with me. Another one is this idea. This goes back to this idea of piece of advice. As a very good friend of mine, I remember her saying, wear the world like a loose garment. And that notion, that visual of just, it's all right, like the world is a loose garment, move smoothly and quietly through it, all is well, has always comforted me.
I think particularly in this time, it's probably some pretty sage advice. I'm not sure if you got that, and it's the obligatory dog barking in the background during this day and age, but that's what we're working on. So speaking of it, in the world of social distancing, which also means, families are kind of right next to us all the time. What are the things you're tackling in your industry? So,
the first thing for us was, it was an immediate response to just the health and safety and well-being of our employees. And I think we might've been the first place to close in Nashville. We were the first tech company in most of the cities in which we operate. And we really, went at this by talking to our employees about their own, just trying to understand their own sense of safety, right? Just this fundamental idea of you'll never be able to do your best work in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Just fundamentally my physical safety, my emotional safety, and then my financial safety is work going to be okay? And we really went at it that way for, with our employees. And we've been really fortunate in that regard. And, it's a tech company, so working remotely was not a problem for us. We'd been telling everybody this could come for a while, and everybody was taking their laptops home early on. So, the first thing is we've transitioned really, really well into this environment. We spent a lot of money with employees, making sure that they had safe spaces to work remotely. We had, we invested a lot in mental health. We have, external groups come in and do meditation sessions and yoga sessions for employees. We've got mental health programs for everybody. And we've done a lot of that to keep our team safe, which in return, they end up being productive. In terms of how it's affected, our environment, we're in marketing technology, specifically in email. Email is the highest return on investment of any one of your marketing channels. And so, which means it doesn't cost anything to hit send on your emails. And so, most companies rally around email right now, and they see it as the primary way to, even if they can't sell or they're having, having to change the way that you market to people, email becomes the way that you engage with your customers. Sorry, my phone, I must have just said something and my Siri just kicked in there. So it was your dog. My Siri just ran a search for me. So anyway, I don't know if Ethan, if you have anything to add to that.
It's one thing is that Wellford does as the CEO, and to put this in context, I don't know if we mentioned the numbers. It's a pretty sizable business. We've got about 650 employees globally in 18 different companies with major offices in a number of major cities. Wellford on a weekly basis records a video that he shares out with the team. And I've heard countless times, directly and indirectly, how much people appreciate that. And it's not just the act of recording a video and sending it out to your employees. Most CEOs are doing something along those lines, but people have commented specifically on the fact that they feel that Wellford's telling the truth, and he's being really authentic and genuine with the message. And in uncertain times that can be scary, truth and authenticity count for an awful lot, and that's a real mark of leadership that Wellford is exhibiting in a challenging time, and that's really setting us apart, and the teams really appreciate that. One of the things that we're doing as a partner is that we have tens of thousands of customers, where it's our base of customers is very diversified, so we're fairly insulated in that regard. But we do have some companies that deal with very large retailers and major retailers. And there's a lot of furloughs happening. There's a lot of layoffs happening. And one of the things that we've elected to do intentionally and proactively is really reach out and try to find opportunities where, when we know someone's been laid off at one business, to look at opportunities for them to find work in another, and to play that networking role. And we're, as a vendor and a partner, in a pretty unique position to be able to do that. It helps us because we spread our goodwill out in the industry, and that always comes back. But to have our head of marketing intentionally say, we're going to make part of what we do every day trying to help people who have lost their job find one someplace else, that just creates a vibe and a momentum within the business that has everyone feeling like we're doing something positive, and we're moving things forward.
And we reached out to, we can push, but we have a lot of nonprofit customers as well. And we went to all of our nonprofit businesses and all of our small businesses. We have a lot of restaurants and franchises at one of our brands. We went to all of them and said, we put them on unlimited programs so they, nonprofits can continue their missions and do their best work when they need to be sending out higher volumes of emails, so that they won't incur any type of financial, stress from doing that. We've got, over $10 million of relief we've been trying to provide to people for payment relief, right now working with small businesses, just trying to find pockets that we can help, wherever we can help along the way.
That's pretty incredible. And I think it's probably a testimony to why you guys have been so successful in all the things that you're doing. So lastly, what have you learned about yourself during this? Obviously, this is probably the strangest time in everyone's existence. What things in this time of social distancing and kind of working remotely would you say, man, I'd love to hold on to that, and man, I can't wait for that to go?
Either why don't you go first?
Yeah, this one for me is this is an easy one. And it'll sound somewhat hackneyed, but boy, I really like my family and my kids. I've made choices like I miss dinner a lot. I get home late a lot. I travel constantly. The gift of being able to sit down and make dinner and break bread with my family every night for the past month has been just overwhelmingly moving for me, and that's something that I will hold on to, and I'm glad. I feel grateful that that this mirror has been held up to show that there's an opportunity I've been missing. Seems obvious, but it's taken this for me to see that, and I feel really grateful that I've had the chance to shift my life in that way.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. It's interesting. We start every week on our management meeting, just kind of going around with all of our senior leaders and just checking in with how everybody's doing. And that sentiment around, there is a lot of travel involved in this job, and the number of people on our team who have paused and made that exact same comment about how nice it's been just to stop and have family dinners again, and spend the time together and be, conscious and deliberate in that time. And I think it also says a lot about our team that we've built, that is such a standard, view. We don't have anybody who's popped up and said, oh my God, my family's driving me insane right now. Don't get me wrong. I do have moments where I wish that I could get on an airplane, but no, I think that's it. And I think it's all definitely a habit that we'd like to continue. I think in a lot of ways, this crisis has brought us closer together as a company. When we've done so many acquisitions, there is certainly a tendency to feel like there's a series of individual companies that are in a lot of ways, united almost by just one series of financial metrics. And the way we've had to communicate with each other has, really allowed everybody to rally around, one culture. And people feel oddly, we have an office in Australia, an office in Uruguay and London and sort of all over. And now distance is no more than the latency on a video call. And, we do coffees with the team. Every team every morning does a 15-minute coffee for no reason, just to hop in. We have lunches, we have trivia sessions. We have random coffees that we set up, and it's just, people are spending so much more time with other people they never knew before in this environment. It's been fascinating to see the way it's brought us together. And some of the communication channels that we've picked up by necessity are things that our employees have said, I really hope we continue to do this thing even after we're together in a physical space. So there's been a lot of really great things that have come out of, a really trying time.
That's neat to hear. I think we're going to hear that theme pretty often from people. So before we wrap, anything else you want to share with the FRA community?
Only that we were talking about this before, so we use Slack as our internal communications tool, as probably most tech companies do. And when we first closed offices, the most active channel that we had was was for parents that we just set up, just sort of asking questions about, what's your school doing and how are you managing kids working from home? And, I just have to give huge props to FRA on this one. It was just from go. I have not heard a single story from any school. And we have kids in other schools in Nashville and one in college as well up in Boston. And not a single school, not a single experience we've run into that has done anything nearly as tight and well done from Go as FRA. And then even more impressive to me was in the fact that you paused and learned from what was took feedback, what was going well, reshuffled the schedule, said we're going to change Fridays, we're going to line up lunches, we're going to adjust, start times. It's just been amazing. So I don't know that I have advice for the community, but other than a thank you for everything that you've done. It's been incredible.
Nothing to add to that. It's been really, really well run, and thank you.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. We're blessed. We have a great team. So, well, Wellford, Ethan, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I know you're busy. I know there's a lot going on, but I know it's going to make a big difference for our students and our families. So I just want to say thanks, and I hope you guys are both safe and your families are safe and well.
That's good.
Thanks. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for asking.
Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.